the regulatory space, the fact that we got well, there was established a renewable energy community framework in 2018, even before the EU directive was approved. There was already a policy in place that really mobilized the market, and of course there was a set of incentives for energy communities that were back then described in the law, that was created a wave of registry of energy communities all over the country. We have more than 400 energy communities registered. The problem with that is that most of these incentives, which are mostly technical advantages to access the grids, also were utilized by companies or small engineering offices as a way to set up an SPV, an energy community, but not with the purpose to engage the local community and offer participation, but more as using just the incentive. So this created some disruptions in the market. Of course, it's a question of experience. The steps given back from the policy side were not really helpful, because the solution to these issues is not to remove the incentives, is to adapt them to the conditions. But definitely, wherever there is a policy and a definition, a market space, this already helped a lot to mobilize the community. Also, I need to say that many of these energy communities are legit, are citizens-based or municipality-owned. They are actually doing great things.
Yes. I also know that, Andreas, you work a lot, and recently you ran a workshop within the site on business models. I think it was last week. Could you tell us which are like maybe 3 aspects that stuck with you the most and that will affect planned work for the site project? Maybe a bit reflection.
Many European countries have already adopted a framework regulations for renewable energy communities. And I was struck how much uncertainty and unclarity still at the national level exists. For example, our Portuguese cases reported that it's completely unclear whether they have to pay any grid tariff or a reduced grid tariff. They're in discussion with the DSO, with the regulator. Nobody has a clear answer what to apply in which cases. What also struck me is, as I mentioned earlier, discussions are very much focused on a technical level. Data exchange is an issue in almost all European countries. Normally, the DSOs give the provided data only 1 day later, so it's not in real time. And how to tackle this is discussed in many European countries. Also, there's strong power of incumbents. We have a very slow smart meter rollout, and the DSOs are not the ones who will push this. In contrary, they have interest not to push this. So while the regulations are in place in maybe already 20 countries, there's so many factual barriers on the ground, uncertainties. Another example is the question of ownership. Do the installations of the energy community need to be owned by the community? In principle, yes, but the English word ownership you can translate in very different ways in different countries. For example, in Austria, there are 2 German words for ownership. So there's a lot of room for loopholes for interpretations. And so having said this, the framework is not clear on a national level. We're not ready to kick off any business models. And as I mentioned, in the discussions we had with many countries, and we are really observing the developments in all EU 27, there's a lack of discussion on the broader long-term view on energy communities, on the holistic approach. What are the multiple benefits? We speak about economic benefits, and of course they're limited. We always say we need additional environmental benefits, social benefits, but what are they? We have to make them tangible. And this discussion is really missing.
Thank you, Andreas. And this brings me also to what Jacob said. Jacob said before. There's down to earth and being able to, in practice, see what is happening with energy communities. I know that Jacob, with NEWCOMERs, you analyzed how different aspects of energy communities vary depending on the government's agreement or arrangement. Maybe we could reflect a little bit on how the government agreement affects possible business models a community can use.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
I guess a broader reflection on the discussion so far is that it is an emerging space, energy communities, and there's lots of different actors getting involved, and that creates quite a lot of innovation, but also a lot of complexity. And so this is where we're trying to link different types of energy communities to different actors. So it emerges from the recognition that there's lots of actors involved, and they can be purely local individuals coming together in a very bottom-up collective way, or energy communities can be explored at the opposite extreme through the involvement design being led by non-local market-oriented incumbents, for instance, can try and get into this space. So if we recognize the diversity, it's also possible to place them onto a spectrum or a continuum with local individuals on one side, moving through kind of a range of partnerships, but moving away from the local as well to incumbents, commercial organizations on the other side that may not be local. And recently we put forward the argument that not only is this just a nice observation, but it's also possible to link energy community business models to different points on this spectrum. And we can illustrate this with a couple of examples. So renewable energy co-ops, cooperatives, owning, managing renewable installations, and perhaps either through net metering or feed-in tariffs, supplying electricity to the grid, potentially using it behind the meter, or selling it through a power purchase agreement. But it's a fairly standardized model that's arisen over the last decade that can be associated more easily with local individuals coming together. Then if we look somewhat in the middle of the spectrum where we see a diversity of actors coming together, then we can associate local supply models where you link local generation assets to local use, whether domestic or commercial use. And on the far end of the spectrum, we can link what we generally think of as being more complex, complicated models, like the creation of virtual power plants or peer-to-peer trading, the things that really then have to use a lot of technical ingenuity, the smartness, the digitalization to create a viable business model. And if I may, the kind of argument behind that is that a key aspect that affects what business model you can pursue or what you can pull off is the amount of knowledge and skills that you need to get it to work. Clearly, there's loads of knowledge and skills involved in all of these, but they get so much wider, more diverse skills that you need to bring in, the more complicated it is. We can also say that the market penetration of these business models varies. So the renewable energy co-op, not belittling it in any sense, but it's very much on the outskirts of existing market arrangements. It's a kind of bolt-on. Whereas when you get to the local supply arrangements, they operate, say, in the Netherlands through the postcode ROSE regulations, but that's very much a protected niche within the market. The regulations create this space where it can happen.